Did you know that more than half of you isn't human? Your body is inhabited by trillions of microbes, which together weigh more than your brain. These microbes affect your health, your mood, and even what you eat. Did you know that more than half of you are a microcosm? Your body is inhabited by trillions of microbes. Every organ, which together weigh more than your brain, is a microscopic village. These microbes affect your health. Who lives there? Bacteria, viruses, and archaea, as well as you. It all begins at birth. The first caress, passing through the birth canal, and receiving breast milk. That moment establishes your first microbiota. Your future health begins there. What you eat not only nourishes you, it also cultivates your microbiome. A ultra-processed hamburger feeds the bacteria that make you ill. A biodiverse dish can transform you. Your body's health is a reflection of the air you inhabit. The soil, the water, the air, everything is a microbiome. Everything is connected. One health, one destiny.
It's Mary.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this year's dialogue to celebrate World Microbiome Day. It's mostly going to be in English, but there are several parts in Spanish. So I'm just going to screen share. Okay. Okay. Firstly, I want to share with you a little photo history of reimagining resistance, Reimaginando la Resistencia, which we began 20 years ago. And I just want to show you some images of the joy and the imagination and the hard work with people in the many places and events over the last 20 years. In the roots of reimagining resistance is the struggle to care for the health of the ecosystems, both visible and invisible. The Voices of the Earth was the theme of the People's Health Assembly in Cuenca in 2005. Indigenous peoples from around the world participated, as well as many, many people from all walks of life in many, many countries. And the Indigenous Peoples Declaration called for taking care of the health of Mother Earth. The vibrant roots of community health is also there in that meeting, as well as work to reveal the social and political context of people's health. And ever present are musicians and artists who help show that life is movement. Also in 2005, some of us started working on the problem of antibiotic resistance. We came to understand its causes and consequences, and we worked to stimulate action around the world and to communicate the threat and to link up networks. So antibiotic resistance is a serious problem, but at that time it was also missing context and relationship, especially the link to the ecosystems. The war metaphor has operated for centuries to structure our relationship to the microbial world. Microbes are seen as the enemy and antibiotics as weapons to protect human and animal lives, but with massive indiscriminate use that without understanding what's happening in the invisible world. So we formed the Reimagining Resistance group to follow our conviction that we need to learn to see the microbial world, understand its power and vitality in the basic processes of life, and change how we live to protect it. In other words, to move away from the war metaphor towards something much more fruitful. So we have been deep in dialogue with greatly diverse people, united by hearts and feelings, imagination, knowledge, and extraordinary abilities in life. Creatively with artists, scientists, social activists, children, Indigenous peoples, farmers, health professionals, women, teachers, and many others, we all made the microbial world more visible to people through arts, science, dialogue, movement, and food. A new metaphor emerged from this work, dancing with bacteria. That's a more realistic image for our relationships with microbes, which we'll tell you more about. If all relationships between humans, nations, and nature continues to be polarized as enemies and weapons, outsiders and insiders, fear and threat, we see a bleak future for our children and grandchildren, the communities they're a part of, the food systems they depend on, and everything else. Please dance with us towards finding our place in the web of life and learning to live beyond static opposition of war to the dynamic, responsive, collaborative relationship that characterizes healthy microbial interactions. So we hope Reimagining Resistance will go another 20 years. Well, this year's dialogue to celebrate World Microbiome Day continues this dance with bacteria. Last year's was a fantastic dialogue called Let's Dance with Our Friends Bacteria to the Rhythm of Art, Science and Life. And now it's available as an e-publication in both English and Spanish, and Juan Carlos will put the link into the chat for you. This year, we're going to dance in the assembly of the invisibles with dance as resistance. The aim is really to spark a radical reimagining of resistance, one that embraces microbial wisdom and collective joy as tools for systemic change. We begin the program with a look at the importance of an assembly of invisibles and the metaphor of dance. And then we continue with 3 speakers who will look at the practical implication of changing the metaphor in medical, soil, and food systems, and the power of narrative in this process. The speakers will then form a panel to discuss 3 key questions, and we urge you after that to ask questions or comments, and please use the chat function all the way through if you wish to share anything and post any questions. We will finish with a call to action and a wonderful dance clip from the recent Art, Science and Soil Assembly held in Ecuador in May this year. So first we begin with a presentation by Satya Sivaraman. Satya is a writer, a former journalist, and a health communicator. He's currently working with REACT. His work has been finding ways of conceptualizing the antimicrobial resistance problem and explaining technical issues to wider audiences. He's produced a variety of educational material on antibiotic resistance, including children's storybooks, reports, documentaries, and a short film which is hilarious called Antibiotic Resistance for Idiots. And he's one of our co-founders of the Resistance Group, Reimagining Resistance Group. Now, he is going to, after his talk, he's going to lead into the next presentation, which is a wonderful interview with an Argentinian dancer, Vivian Luz. And Vivian is a director, choreographer, dancer, and teacher with an extensive career in theatre and contemporary dance. She debuted in 1969 and has operated her studio in Recoleta since 1977. She founded the company Los Celebrantes and has created works that are known for very strong visual and conceptual elements. In 2022, she received the Distinction for Lifetime Achievement from Argentores In 2023, she participated in Danza Abierta with her work Otros Textos Otros as part of celebrating the 40th anniversary of Dance in Democracy. So, Satya, please.
Thank you, Mary, for that great introduction. Welcome to all my colleagues, fellow speakers, and all the participants here to this World Microbiome Day webinar. I'm supposed to speak on dancing as resistance and as a metaphor of life. Well, metaphors are like tools used in all languages to explain complex concepts in a very truthful but also simple terms. They are in fact a form of micro-storytelling. Stories told in a word or with just a few of them put together to evoke an accurate picture of how something really is or how it works. The most prevalent metaphor in medicine currently is that of war, and it has been the metaphor of choice in medicine for a very long time. The war metaphor of humans and microbes being intractable enemies who can only fight each other endlessly till one species is wiped out completely. By the way, there's a Spanish translation of my talk, which I hope Juan Carlos can share in the chat for those who speak Spanish. Once we have defined the other as dangerous, untrustworthy, and a threat to our survival, the war metaphor allows us to go ahead using all possible means to eliminate them to the last member of the species. The war metaphor is used not just in medicine, but also widely in our societies, in geopolitics and even personal relations. In fact, I would argue that the war metaphor in medicine comes from society. It is not unique to medicine. The war that happens in our societies is what is coming to medicine as a metaphor. And the metaphor is indeed the propellant of a phenomena unique to our species, the ability to imagine, want, and carry out a genocide. In the context of antibiotic resistance, the war metaphor leads to the blind and relentless use of antibiotics, which in the context of microbial life, the antibiotics are really like bunker buster bombs or even nuclear weapons. They kill microbes indiscriminately, sparing neither the good nor commensal bacteria, while targeting the so-called bad ones. I say so-called because the term bad is entirely dependent on the context. What is bad in one context can very easily be good in another. But the war metaphor has no time for nuances of any kind. Its approach is basically, you're with us or against us. It's the same genocidal mindset that one sees in global or even national politics today. It is even worse for microbes as they are not visible to the naked eye. It is not their fault that we are unable to see them, but their invisibility makes it easier to pretend they don't really exist, or that their existence will not be missed if we kill all of them. In human societies, this approach is adapted to deliberately make entire populations, communities, forms of life disappear from our vision, as also from our television, our thoughts, and above all, our conscience. Whether it be workers, farmers, indigenous people, women, the dark, yellow, brown-skinned people of the world are destined to be invisible to those who run the world. The rulers want so much of the limelight. They can achieve this only through permanent darkness for the rest of the world. Another technique used throughout history to justify genocide is to demonize those you want to eliminate. For a very strange reason, despite being invisible to our eyes, our fertile imagination keeps imagining bacteria to be ugly creatures with horns, deformed teeth, clumsy, awkward, inarticulate, and with bad hairstyles too. In fact, the absence of prettiness, which is shaped by a racist worldview, is often enough justification to kill others in very large numbers, whether in the microbial or human world. Invisibility in this way is just a pretext. The fact is that we don't want to see them and we don't care. We are blinded by fear, but also by arrogance and hubris. What is it that we human beings, made in the image of God, have to learn from mere microbes? The metaphor of dance, which we are proposing as an alternative to the war metaphor, is one out of many ways in which we can describe what happens when humans encounter bacteria. I say it's one of many other ways of describing the relationship because football is another metaphor that comes to mind, which captures basically the need for alertness, flexibility, and agility in living through the 90 minutes we call an entire lifetime. The metaphor of dance, however, works very well as it not just accurately describes how living systems really interact with each other, but also because it is universal in all cultures and societies. It is a language that even the newborn babies understand, born as they are after months of dancing around in their mother's womb. It is a language that every living organism on the planet understands. Dance is a synonym for all of life itself. You stop dancing only when you die. Though the beautiful thing about death is that nature ensures that even after death, you go on to become part of a much larger cosmic dance where the microbes decompose and distribute you to the universe as recyclable waste material or spare parts for new forms of life to flourish. In the larger universe, the dance never ceases. A very broad definition of dance could be that it is the ability to occupy the same space as other people or living organisms without stepping on each other's toes all the time. It is just another way of saying live and let live. And this is really the way our species has survived over the millennia, by negotiating constantly. To apply the metaphor of dance beyond medicine, one has to simply see it as a negotiation, give and take, dialogue, empathy, alertness to the presence and needs of others. It is not always carrots, and sometimes a stick is wielded too, but it is nevertheless a negotiation without any notion or idea of a final solution. The process and means are as important as the ends, and nobody is allowed to wipe out the other completely. As a metaphor, dance is primarily about the negotiation of space, time, and energy by all living organisms on the dance floor of Mother Earth. It is because of the millions of people around the world who refuse to die and insist on dancing to show their resistance to the forces of death that life still survives in our midst. And this is the only hope too, that we will all find the courage, the motivation to continue dancing against impossible odds, facing frightening obstacles, and dance even in completely bombed out dance halls. If they take away our feet, we will dance on our hands. In their absence, we will dance with our eyes. Dance is the most powerful weapon of the weak against the forces of death in our world. And as the German philosopher Nietzsche said once, dance not with them who say, this is the way, the only way, but rather with those who say, we are dancing, let us dance together. We are all born without a choice on this planet. Nobody asked our permission to bring us forth into this world. We are forced to deal with whatever has already happened for thousands of years in history, whether it's human history or microbial history. We can't choose who our parents are or the lands we come from. We have to survive and even thrive if possible with whatever we have and can get. The question before all of us is simply this: can we do it? Can we survive through a dance full of beauty and grace? Or do we have to go to war with everyone else around us? With this, I would like to lead on to the next part of the program, which is a beautiful interview with Vivian Luz, an Argentinian dancer and choreographer, as Mary said, who used dance as a powerful tool of resistance during Argentina's military dictatorship. While earlier I talked about dance as a metaphor, the fact remains that even the literal performance of dance is a very powerful act of resistance, and Vivienne Luz in this interview explains how and why. Over to the interview. Thank you.
Claramente la danza me eligió a mí desde muy joven. Yo viví una época de persecución ideológica severa, como todos saben, en la Argentina fue muy duro, y lo que sí ocurrió con la gente que me rodeaba es que fuimos bastante valientes, o sea, no enfrentamos el régimen militar de ese momento, pero seguimos haciendo cosas, y seguimos haciendo algunos espectáculos bastante provocadores, digamos. En relación a lo ecológico y en relación a cómo nos relacionamos con el mundo bacteriano y de los virus. Lo que hizo en mí es tomar siempre como referente preocupaciones serias para hacer una coreografía. O sea, nunca me metí a hacer cosas más estéticas o más decorativas o más pasatistas, sino siempre encarando una temática que tuviera que ver con alguna preocupación mía interna. Y en este momento una de mis preocupaciones, yo ya tengo nietos, es esa, ¿no? ¿Qué mundo estamos dejando? Y si es que va a sobrevivir este mundo. Creo que la pelea que hace la medicina, la ciencia ortodoxa, con ciertas enfermedades, bacterias, virus que nos invaden, no es lógica porque, como bien leí por ahí, las bacterias fueron las primeras y nos van a sobrevivir seguramente. Entonces estaría muy bueno poder convivir con ellas. Me gustó mucho esa comparación, esa metáfora de pensar que uno puede bailar con ellas. Yo tengo una obra ya de hace como 15 años que se llama Serán otros los ruidos, donde voy viendo cómo una pareja primero es agredida por las guerras mundiales, después lo paso a la Argentina y bueno, por los militares, y finalmente lo que agrede a esa pareja e impide su felicidad y su desarrollo son las fuerzas de la naturaleza, cómo nos invaden las fuerzas de la naturaleza que no podemos controlar. Todo lo que está sucediendo en la naturaleza, cada vez con más potencia, como respuesta a cómo no estamos cuidando la naturaleza, ¿no? Y con serio peligro de perder todo el disfrute que podíamos tener. Si supiéramos cómo interrelacionarnos, asociarnos, poder ir sumando, ¿no?, a toda la riqueza que se nos otorga. Sobre todo las danzas primitivas. Yo creo que es el mejor lugar para ver cómo las danzas en su origen quizás fue la primera manifestación del ser humano. Antes, obviamente, que escribir, que hablar en algún lenguaje coherente, antes de las palabras. El cuerpo es antes de las palabras. Y entonces, simplemente haciendo un ruidito en un palito, ya hay un ritmo y ya uno baila. Yo creo que el contacto de la danza, por ser para mí la primera manifestación del ser humano, es la danza. Llámese danza cualquier tipo de movimiento del ser humano que salga del necesario. O sea, hay un movimiento necesario que es para para cazar, para sobrevivir, para alimentarse, para fecundar, etc. Y hay otro que es gratuito, que es el placer de sentir el cuerpo. Y yo creo que eso está desde el origen en el ser humano, sí. En realidad me quedó picando muchísimo esa pregunta porque me da ideas, me da ideas y pienso que en la actualidad con todos los medios que hay, me da una idea. Tendría que investigar más, obviamente las bacterias y, digamos, yo creo que todo el sistema del mundo, ¿no? Es decir, los átomos también tienen una danza y de ahí hasta las galaxias, ¿no? Es decir, uno puede circular hasta las galaxias. El mundo no está quieto nunca, o sea, somos un mundo en movimiento permanente, más rápido, más lento, con distintos ritmos, con distintos momentos. Y visualizar las bacterias en movimiento me parece que es elemental, no están nunca quietas, ¿no? Los microorganismos. Me parece muy, muy fascinante empezar a imaginar algo por ahí. Yo creo que sí, que tiene que ver con la convivencia, lo que hablábamos antes en relación a la colaboración, a la asociación, que es todo lo que se da cuando uno baila en grupo o en pareja, o sea, tener en cuenta al otro. Tendríamos que tener en cuenta a las bacterias para que nos vaya mejor con nuestros cuerpos, que son finitos. Y entonces el cuidado de los cuerpos tiene que ver con ese entrecruce que sí, que se puede imaginar perfectamente como una danza. Siempre encaré mi obra en relación a las cosas que me preocupan y las cosas que me preocupan tenían que ver con todo lo que estuvimos hablando, desde la militancia ideológica, política, etcétera, hasta en la actualidad todo lo que tiene que ver con lo ecológico, con el contacto con la naturaleza y el descubrimiento de las poblaciones aborígenes tanto más sabias. Todo eso es reciente, o sea, no es que hace miles de años que... No, estamos hace poco acercándonos y entendiendo esas ideas. Yo creo que está plasmado en muchas obras. Mi lenguaje tiene que ver con, te decía, no lo estético, o sea, que no se quede la gente viendo qué bien que levanta la pierna, qué bien que salta, cuántos giros da, sino son imágenes. Yo siempre digo que yo hago imagen en movimiento más que danza. Son imágenes que golpean, que te dejan sin aliento, que te dejan sin reflexión al principio, te lo llevas a tu casa una vez que saliste del espectáculo para masticarlo. Yo juego a eso, ¿no? A que sean imágenes potentes, que tengan que ver con después la reflexión. Y sí, hubo un par de obras donde claramente hablaba antes del COVID, mucho antes, de lo que se veía venir, ¿no? Es como la venganza de la naturaleza o la venganza de las bacterias, ¿no? Y yo creo que eso no puede tener respuesta violenta, porque vamos a perder claramente, ¿no? Tiene que haber una respuesta que me encanta la idea de ustedes y adhiero, artística, una respuesta artística, ¿no? Desde un lugar de calma y de interacción y de comprensión, básicamente de comprensión. Yo creo que el susto nos ha ganado y ante el susto, bueno, reaccionamos como un estallido, ¿no?, de violencia. Eso hay que reflexionar mucho. Me parece que ustedes hace mucho están en esta tarea, eso también me sorprendió gratamente, y y bueno, hay que seguir difundiendo y haciendo escuela.
Very beautiful, thought-provoking. Well, between Satya and Vivian, we've opened a very interesting space for this afternoon's dialogue. And now we're going to continue to open that space with a very different perspective, different expertise, different experience with Viveka Nordberg from Sweden. And Viveka is going to speak about the health of mother-child, dialoguing with the microbiome. Viveka is a pediatrician and a neonatologist at Karolinska University Hospital in the Department of Neonatology in Sweden. She's co-founder of the Pediatric Health Initiative, which is an NGO which collaborates with organizations and hospitals in Tanzania, Uganda, Gambia, and Sweden on training of staff for pediatric healthcare and neonatology practice, infection prevention, and research. She has also collaborated with colleagues in Cuenca in Ecuador on antibiotic resistance, and she has a long-standing interest in the maternal and neonatal microbiome. And we've used many of her beautiful words in the way she thinks about babies and parents and the whole process in many of our events in reimagining resistance and the networks in Latin America. Welcome, Vivi.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me and for those nice words. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
That's very good. So I work with neonates and that time of life when the humans first encounter with microbes. And what does that mean for health and for the risk of infection and death, but also thriving and developing healthy children? First of all, I think it's very interesting to discuss what we have learned from microbes about storytelling. And bacteria has been here long before us for billions of years, as we heard, and they've silently shaped the planet and co-involving with all life forms, including us. And since they were already present when we arrived, they will also remain long after we're gone. But how do they speak to us before we could see them? I think the answer could lie in the fear that they evoked, the fear of sepsis, of death, and also losing the loved ones. So in many ways, bacteria were the original storytellers. So since they were not visible for the human eye, the tales was telling us about vulnerability and survival, and that is very clear when we meet the very new human, the child, the neonate. Since science now has been developing, it has really been helping us to translate their silent narratives into understanding and action, to understand how infections, how bacteria infect humans, and also how bacteria make humans thrive. So what is then the role of the neonatologist in the microbial story? Well, birth is peaceful. Sometimes it could be turbulent. And I'm working with all the different parts of this, both by looking at clinical markers for sepsis and striving to have antibiotic stewardship in the neonatal wards. But for that baby that is born, it's really important to use the knowledge about what breast milk is actually doing for the neonatal microbiome and also the importance of skin-to-skin care to guide the healthy colonization for the child. We also need to highlight how dysbiosis drive inflammation, both in short and a long-term risk, meaning that a baby that is born maybe preterm could, after 2 or 3 weeks, have a very severe inflammation if the intestinal biota is dysbiotic. And also long-term risks, of course, like asthma, obesity, many inflammatory diseases. So we really need to promote the reduction of how we target antibiotic use in these vulnerable newborns, both the premature babies and also the term babies. And we need to bridge this science between article reading and while we're bedside by the baby in diagnostics and all our daily decisions. So I think that you could look at this microbial story as a bouquet of flowers, when some of them represent the fear of neonatal sepsis, but also some of them represent the healing and also the balance to a healthy development. So talking about dance, of course, the neonate is the first dance partner, and it's really striking to see how powerful the neonate uses this gift of life when the bacteria step by step guides the neonate to the outside world. One can say that the soil of Mother Nature becomes the soul of the newborn. Antibiotics are, as you might know, the most commonly used drugs in neonates worldwide, and that's of course life-saving in the neonates that are infected. But that's also the challenge, because we know that for the non-infected neonates, antibiotics is really harmful, and has been numerous studies about this issue, especially the last 15 years. So this is just an example of how antibiotics could be harmful, except the development of antibiotic resistance. So this is on the one side, we know that it is harmful, but also we have all the bacteria that we get more knowledge about that we know also kill the neonates. And the big issue about the antibiotic resistance development and how we need to, especially in low-income countries, search for another strategy with empiric antibiotics because of developing resistance. So for about 100 babies, we see one sepsis case, and the rest of the 99 babies, and these are global numbers, both in high and low-income countries, we see that 99 babies get antibiotics when not needed. But it's very difficult, and the challenge is that all the noise around us, depending on if you're in a high or low-income setting, if you have the possibility to observe your baby, to have the diagnostic marker for that sepsis probably case. And also, if you remember that case you had 2 weeks ago with a baby succumbing in sepsis, the physician might then give antibiotics just because of the fear of death and sepsis. So what is right and wrong? Well, when we have the knowledge, we need to strive to collaborate and communicate about all these issues and share them with each other. And we know that wealthy societies, microbial health is really a privilege, while in some parts of the world, many lack access to basic care and also life-saving antibiotics. So microbial health and global justice go hand in hand. And for example, some of the gaps, for an example, if there's a C-section where the mother cannot get antibiotics because it's not there, maybe that mother will succumb in sepsis, and maybe also her child. And for example, areas where the infant doesn't have possibility to get antibiotics for its pneumonia in 6 months of age, also that baby might succumb. So this is not just medical, as you see, it's about justice and about global justice. And all of us working with this issue need to prevent antibiotic overuse and of course guarantee access where it's really needed. So from fear to understanding the microbial message. Microbes are not enemies. They are really essential life partners. They guide our development and they're responsible shaping our immunity from birth. That's the first bacteria that our immune system meets in the intestine of the neonate and really forms it and teach us the balance, especially in antibiotic use, that less is more. So one can say that microbes are quiet witnesses to our medical advances and also our ambitions in healthcare. So if we want to protect health and advance medicine, we must really listen to microbes. So their message is clear: protect, respect, and understand them. Life depends on it.
Thank you. That's wonderful, Vivi. Fantastic. Thank you so much. A lot to think about. It's quite a struggle in the medical world to move people to practice from that point of view. You'll have more to say about that in the panel discussion, I'm sure. Now I'd like to introduce Stephen Sherwood. Stephen is an agroecologist, a scientist and a professor who divides his time between his Ucuhuaycu farm in the Andes of Ecuador, which he runs with Miriam Paredes, and Wageningen University in the Netherlands. Stephen has he's worked in and lived in Latin America since 1986, and he's worked with lots of farmer-to-farmer movements in Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Bolivia, Peru, and Ecuador. Drawing on his experience in his farm, Ucuhuaycu, Steve is a part of a network seeking to help farmers pioneer the science and the art of ecological soil management and become central actors in climate change mitigation, and also restoring food and cooking systems. So over to you, Stephen, to tell us about soil plant health. Before the dance came the space.
There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here. Let me get back to the beginning. And yes, I'll be sharing our experience with work on how to help take care of spaces. And from our perspective, and this came from a farmer who had an enlightening conversation about how life is a series of movement through space. You know, he talked about how we're born through a hole, we breathe through holes, we eat through a hole, and when we die, we are placed in a hole. And for him and the farmers in this conversation here in Ecuador, life is about taking care of these spaces. And what's so interesting from that, from a microbial perspective, is how these spaces in soil, as we see in this photograph, can only be created by microbes. We humans are incapable of creating soil aggregates and micropores. And this happens through a symbiosis with plants, through sugars that come from photosynthesis, that is basically sunlight brought down. And I want to talk about how we utilize this to help farmers become actors in taking care of these spaces. Let me see if I can advance. And so we have a serious problem today because our agriculture and our food systems fundamentally underlines life. right? We know that pesticides kill more people than wars and homicides combined. And food-related disease, ironically, has become the leading cause of death in most countries across the planet, particularly through chronic disease tied to overweight, obesity, hypertension, diabetes. But most seriously for our species right now is this question about how our food production consumption oxidizes these spaces through all kinds of creative but self-destructive ways. And our agriculture and food is a primary source of soil degradation, leading to things such as climate change and global warming that now places into question the future of our species. One of the key activities that we do with farmers and the networks of farmers with whom we work is take a walk through the origins of the Pacha, through the Earth Mother. And we seek a conversation with Luca, Luca being the first living organism on the planet, sort of a proto-bacteria. And this is a few images of conversations with Luca, in this case on the volcano where I live, where we talk about how she's evolved into other forms of life. And this leads to discussions about lichens and about plants and succession and photosynthesis and how microbes have been drivers of this. And eventually we end up at a native forest at the top of our volcano called the Mamatena. And this 4-hour hike through petagenesis, in practice, it's about 5 kilometers, where every step, okay, is about 10 million years, okay? And eventually we cover the 4.9 billion years of Earth's evolution. And some of the key insights that we seek with farmers is understanding that microbes effectively govern Earth and that symbiosis trumps competition. So it's not just about a competition of microbes, but really the symbiosis within and between communities that makes life possible. The centrality of photosynthesis and how the carbon that structures these spaces and has effectively led to an oxygen-rich environment that makes space or makes life possible comes from, okay, this relationship of bringing down sunlight, the Inti, as they say in Quechua culture and Quechua culture, that gives life to this planet. And that Earth is a biome of biomes, and that humans are not, we're not part of nature, we are effectively nature, right? It flows through us and we flow through it. And the centrality of the soil sponge is the site of our socio-biological action, and how we can become space makers and help to preserve and conserve and regenerate the reorganization of terrestrial ecosystems and then through our engagement with soil. And what's interesting for our Andean participants living here, indigenous people, is how this immediately relates to Andean cosmovision. Not in a romantic way, but in a highly functional way. There's a picture of the Chacana here, which is the bridge, right? Chacana in Quechua means the bridge connecting the human and the more than human. And they immediately see this relationship and how things are connected. And particularly that spiral in the middle you there, which is this central seed or life force called the Sumakalsai, and how we need to put that central life force to work in preserving and conserving the possibility of life. Where do we do this? We do this at the chakra, the field, in farms, but returning the chakra, this traditional Andean agroforestry system, as our site of dance, of interacting with space. And I'll go quite quickly because we're trying to cover nearly 5 billion years in 7 minutes. So I'm just going to highlight some of the key features of microbes in this symbiosis to give you insights into how microbes effectively increase the reach and really the intensity of roots. The symbiosis between endophytes, endobacteria, mycorrhizae will increase the reach of roots by 600 times. And how this microbial necromass, right, the dead microbes, is about 40% of soil organic carbon. It is the most stable form of carbon. And these glues that hold together the spaces is really what allows us to accumulate and create a sponge, to go from the rock in the beginning of pedogenesis to the sponge in the site of reproduction. And how microbes regulate plant health. Okay, I as a farmer, I can feed nutrients, I can give water. If you look at this pyramid, the bottom two levels, I can work to help to maximize photosynthesis, which is what farming is all about. And I can look for creating balanced nutrition, but I cannot activate active immunity. The top two levels of that, in terms of what mediating how plants absorb nutrients, and the existence of secondary metabolites, and the effects that they have on plant health can only be achieved through microbes. Microbes mediate the dance at that level. And I won't go into detail, but the essential learning for farmers is to make this invisible visible and to see the functionality of the rhizosphere, right? The rhizosphere is the space around the roots where we find about 1,000 to 2,000 times the microbial populations than we find in the other parts of the soil. And that is the site, right, of the regeneration of life. And as David McNear said about 15 years ago in an article in Nature, the rhizosphere is the site of global processes on our planet. And we had this, what we call the rhizophagia, the rhizophagy cycle. And that's this sort of site of symbiosis between plants, the sort of seed biome, the soil biome, and the phytobiomes, and where those interactions take place. Plants give almost half of all their sunlight energy, photosynthate, to the soil to facilitate and mobilize and feed bacteria and fungi and other organisms. Sadly, current agriculture systematically undermines all of that, right? We know that modern agriculture, through biocides, through tillage, through over-fertilization, interrupts and ends this functionality. So farmers need to learn about this webs of life and the functions and the flows and how we are not part of ecosystems. We are effectively ecosystems. And how to return the sumac calcite to the Pachamama and how to nurture and cure that through agriculture. So what is our purpose? And I'll end with this. And this is what we're trying to do. It's basically soil aggregation, creating and renewing the glues and giving space back to soil, the space that we have taken away, which you see on sort of the far left in the pioneering, highly degraded soil. And as we move through successional phases from the desert to a climax forest, how we can learn as humans, but also as farmers, to allow those aggregates to come back to bear and how we can functionally do this. We achieve this with farmers and with our networks of people through ecological literacy, this messy encounter of ontologies between science and Andean cosmovision and the messiness of modern culture. And how can we reconstruct our relationships, through making the invisible visible? And farmer-led experimentation and a bunch of creative ways for farmers to work with microscopy to manipulate functional groups, to work to create niches, because we know on this planet when we create a niche, microbes will occupy them. And so basically our challenge is to create these niches on our farms. And how do we do that? Through composting, organic amendments, through opening oxygen into the soil, through humidity, but most importantly, through harvesting sunlight, which is done through biodiversity. And this process of continual encounters, in this case among about 150 farmers, the pioneers of agroecology, and continually working together to learn, but to share our experiment and to accelerate this curing, this nurturing, this rehabilitation of the spaces on the planet. And this involves most fundamentally creating symbiosis. When we pull out a plant in modern agriculture, we don't see the dreadlocks, what we call the rhizosheath. We don't see an active rhizosphere. We've taken away that symbiosis, and we've created a form of slavery where humans have to give the nutrients, have to give the water, have to give the defense through pesticides to the plants. But when we create this and we renew the rhizosheath and this codependence, the microbes in the soil hold together in the roots. And that's our key indicator. And when we see that, we know that there is symbiosis. We know that photosynthetic plants are feeding sunlight to the soil, okay? And the microbes and the plants are working together to create the possibility of health. We seek microbial abundance and diversity, not just competition, but symbiosis. And we seek returning the chakra, the traditional forms of highly diverse, highly functional farming and maximizing photosynthesis through biodiversity into food systems. And through all kinds of creative ways, through the regenerative kitchen that makes possible regenerative eating and cooking, the possibility of regenerative farming.
Okay,
And so
Stephen?
the closing thought,
Great.
I wanted to talk about before the dance came to space. And this issue of learning how to compost, and compost is also a metaphor to collapse the dichotomies between humans and the modern humans. And we could talk about that in other moments. Responsibility, this ability to both connect to other organisms and to feel, okay, both through a cognitive way, but also through an affective way, okay, and develop that competence of coexistence and finding a rhythm, okay, in and through daily practice, not just through ethics, okay, but also through practice. And from a biorelational perspective, we end with the thought that, is the microbial dance really about resistance, or is it about this coexistence? And with that, I'll end. Thank you.
Great question. Okay, thank you, Stephen. Amazing to think what's going on under the soil when you take it seriously and understand it. Now, I would like to introduce Mayra Domondo. Mayra is Domondo is the artistic name of Mayra Mendonça Nobrega. I hope I said that right, Mayra. She's a Brazilian psychologist, a narrative therapist, and an oral storyteller. Since 2020, she's facilitated groups of people who wish to recover and tell stories of their lives. And as an oral storyteller, she's participated in international festivals in 6 countries. So she believes stories hold the power to recognize strength and promote encounters. And in this context, now, I'm going to give us a little introduction to her thoughts about how words have power, how narratives can support microbiome care. Please, Mayra.
Thanks, Mary. I'm really excited to be here. So let's begin. Since time immemorial, humanity has told stories. But why? What drives us to tell them? What's the purpose of narrating? And how do stories affect our lives? To begin exploring these questions, I'd like to share a short story. It is said that in a certain region of Africa, there is a village where every person has a name and a song. To find this unique melody, the pregnant woman walks alone into the forest. In silence, she sits under the shade of a tree and waits. She waits until she hears the song of the being growing in her womb. She listens, repeats it, let it vibrate through her body. And when she's certain, she returns to the village to share it. Gradually, the whole community learns a new song. It's sung at the baby's birth, during rites of passage, at weddings, after great achievements, in times of illness, and finally, at the moment of death. But, oh, please, let me into the second slide, I think, please. Yes, thanks. Gradually, the whole community learns the new song. It is sung. Oh my God, sorry. But there is one more time when the song is sung, and when the person causes harm to the community. Then everyone forms a circle, the person in the center, and they sing their song loud and clear, very times, because they believe that when someone acts violently towards themselves, other, or the world, it is because they have forgotten who they are and where they come from. Remembering who we are might also mean remembering that we are not separate from the world we inhabit. To dance with bacteria instead of fighting them is to reconnect with a deep truth that the division between us and them is a harmful illusion. Long before writing existed, our ancestors gathering around the fire to tell stories, the stories that explain the world's mysteries and passes on knowledge across generations. As Walter Benjamin once said, storytelling is a way to share experience and keep collective memory alive, a form of resistance as old as humanity itself. The psychologist Jerome Bruner reminds us that we don't tell stories. It's not just we like to tell stories. It's that we think in stories. It's through them that we make sense of life, shape our identities, and imagine the future. And it's not just individual. Communities are shaped by the stories they tell and by the ones they silence. Words are never neutral. The metaphors we use and the images we repeat shape the way we perceive, feel, and act. For a long time, the dominant narrative about microbes has been one of war. Viruses and bacteria are enemies. They must be eliminated, disinfect, eradicate, exterminate. That way of feeling, the way of telling the words reinforces a metaphor of separation, of hostility towards the invisible. But what if we change the story? What if we saw the microbes not as enemies, but as invisible allies with whom we have co evolved? Contemporary biology shows us that we live in a constant dialogue with them. In fact, we are walking ecosystems. As Lynn Margulis proposed, life did not evolve through competition, but through cooperation among microscopic beings. And it is this dynamic balance between the micro and the macro that sustains health, the fertility of the soil, the air we breathe, our digestion, emotions, and even our thoughts. That's why today I invite you to pay close attention to the stories we repeat every day, especially those that seem harmless but shape our entire worldviews. What kind of what kind of word are we reproducing when we say kills 99.9% of bacteria? Do we really want to kill every bacteria in the world? Why? And what are the new possibilities? What the new possibilities emerge when we begin telling the stories of symbiosis, cooperation, interdependence? Because the stories we tell just they just don't reflect reality. They create it. They shape what we consider desirable or undesirable, possible or impossible. They perform truth. Did I say okay? Truth? And often we don't even realize we're living inside someone else's stories, repeating without questions. Capitalism is built on very powerful narratives. One of them is that the profit is the ultimate goal of existence. We must have look for profit every time. But another thing that is being said in capitalism is that the world is divided between what belongs to me and what doesn't. What I can use and what I can discard. This applies to land, bodies, timing, and also to microbial world. And then there is a big story that separates us, me and the other, human and nature, body and mind, culture and biology. The narrative fragments and weaken us. It disconnects us from the complex web of relationships that sustains all life. These narratives shapes our politics, our systems of production, consumption, health, and daily life. They are directly tied to the degradation of the planet. Because when you see the Earth as a resource to be exploited or bacteria as enemies to be wiped out, we break the bonds of reciprocity and balance that make life possible. But every story can be rewritten or danced. We can make space for new narratives, ones that listen, that care, that reconnect. Stories that remind us health is not the absence of microorganisms, but the ability to live in harmony with them. So dancing with bacteria is an invitation to feel the soil, to connect with those who live in it, visible or invisible, to join hands and commit ourselves to protecting the balance and health of the planet, to commit ourselves to life. So I leave you these questions. What new stories do we need to tell to honor life in all its forms, visible and invisible? And finally, what kind of world could we begin to imagine if we start telling them today? Thank you.
Thank you, Myra. Well, now we've set up a very interesting space for a discussion. It's the nuances and the perspectives that have led into this from those presentations are wonderful. So now I'm going to ask Satya and Vivi and Stephen and Myra for a panel discussion. Maybe we have about 10 or 12 minutes. I have 3 questions. I'll start with the first one. So how do the invisible dance to resist? And is it to resist? Is it to coexist? Is it to symbiose? And how does this happen, whether you're a microbe or an invisibilized person, referring to Satya's talk? I'd quite like to start with Vivi, who I think has had a bit of a problem, and she's on her phone, so we may not see her. Vivi, can you come online? Vivi?
Yes, do you hear me now?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
I'm so sorry for that.
Go ahead.
Yes, my computer broke. So I'm on the phone. So for the first questions, how do the invisible dance to resist, whether microbes or invisible people? So I think that's, as a neonatologist, I work daily with the invisible, both biologically and socially. The neonatal microbiome is a perfect example, a complex dynamic ecosystem of microbes that dances through constant adaptation and communication. So also in these premature infants and the newborns, the microbial dance is very fragile, but very, very powerful. So I think that when they evolve, the microbes in the neonatal intestine and on their skin, their dance is in many ways a form of survival resistance, I think. So I like that dance dance metaphor in this situation.
So do you see, so what about rhythm or harmonics or music? How would you think about that in your world?
Yes, you need to have music to dance, right? Because you're not on a quiet stage, and it's all about depending on what kind of music you have around. I think how the dance is evolving. If it's together, or if you're many, if you're all alone, dancing to really quiet music or the noise around you. I think that if you talk about the music, you could also say it could be very harmonic and also very noisy. So I think that by caring about like maternal care during pregnancy and delivery, and also how we support the neonate when it's born. I think the knowledge that we have, because it's there, we just need to use that knowledge in a very stubborn way to tell our fear, that the fear of sepsis, looking at the incidence numbers on how common is sepsis really, and we need to trust the really low numbers, and to make the music around that dance very, very calm for the baby, and we can support those babies. We can find the babies that are infected if we listen carefully, if we look carefully, and we observe carefully the baby. So I think that music and dance and noise are definitions that are also a good way to tell physicians working with this patient group that the fear could be a little bit less.
Okay, good. Satya, how do you think on this question?
Very basically, the term resistance, if you look at the etymology of the word, it comes from a French origin. Basically, it means to stand up and hold your place in midst of danger. No? So resistance actually means to stand up and hold your place, your identity, what are your purpose in life. And that's what bacteria do. Bacteria are much older. The invisible, talking about how the invisible resist, is by holding their place. They don't give up. They basically are the oldest living organism on the planet. And when they come under attack, whether from other segments of nature, because within nature there is competition also. Bacteria can turn against some bacteria can turn against other bacteria. So, in fact, antibiotics are produced in nature by bacteria to protect themselves. But this is on a very, very, very microscopic scale. They don't produce it in the kind of quantities that we are producing it right now. Human production of antibiotics is driven by fear, and also, as I said earlier, arrogance and hubris. In nature, it appears in the right balance. So it's not about doing away with antibiotics, but the bacteria themselves resist through 5 principal actions that are characteristic of the microbial world. One is to conserve diversity. You have phenomenal diversity in the microbial world. Second is they're constantly adapting to change. Third is they work collectively. When we say bacteria, we forget that these bacterial colonies, you're talking about billions and billions of bacteria working together for a common purpose. And then bacteria are also characterized by balanced consumption. They never overconsume. You know, if they were similar to humans, they would have consumed all there is to consume in the planet by now. There would be no space for any other species. But they live and let live. There's balanced consumption. And they move with ecological cycles. And what's interesting about the invisibilized people who are like the microbes, except that they're visible to the human eye, but we have deliberately refused to see them or invisibilize them. They've got a lot of common with the bacteria. They're hugely diverse people. They constantly adapt to change to survive. They work collectively because it is only collective action that can improve the condition. They consume in a balanced way because they've got other sources of happiness and joy than other than endless consumption. And they move with ecological cycles partly also because it's either their tradition or they have no choice. If climate change is going to make you move from your habitat to another habitat, you don't have a choice in matter, but they adapt. So there is a lot of common ways in which both the visible and invisible world resist their own death and resist by doing things that are positive and constructive for the furtherance of life.
Yeah, wonderful. Stephen, can I come to you? So, taking what Satya said and these 5 wonderful lessons from how the microbial world works, and also his that thought about what resistance really means for continuing life. So what really is the implications of dance as a metaphor for resisting and for healing food and environmental systems? I mean, you've worked with many farmers. Is this way of working, and how does are they in a struggle with their own fear and the power of the agricultural system that is killing all of us, as you pointed out? So what's the implication of this dance metaphor to change these systems?
Yeah, and I thought Satya's presentation at the beginning was fascinating, and pages of notes, and I want to get the Spanish copy so I can read it more closely. But this, the made invisible, I think it's extremely important. This is a human problem, right? Because of our ability to imagine, our greatest ability, supposedly, to extract ourselves from context, but it might be also, and to abstract, which makes us beautiful emotional dancers periodically, but it also makes us self-destructive. Our ability to live outside of context creates a possibility of violence that goes beyond what other species are capable of. And if we think of intelligence as this ability to adapt, obviously we can question how intelligent are humans, right? Homo sapiens. I mean, that's something we have to think about. Our ability to adapt apparently is not nearly as sophisticated and nuanced or performative as we think it is. And I guess the way that I think about it, and the reason why I emphasize existence, not that I disagree with what's been said by others about resistance in other contexts, but within the agroecology movements, one of the problems I have is it's often been reduced to resistance, sort of fighting against the capitalist beast, led often by sort of Marxist and neo-Marxist people in Latin America. And I'm not necessarily against that, but what I have concerns about it is when it's limited to that and not, it's pointing fingers, right? And not seeing that 3 fingers are pointed back to me. And maybe one is up to the woman up there, whoever it is up there watching it all. But this issue about what can I do with my own space and how can I transform the little margins that I have to seek through very practical ways, greater coherence and to advance things. And I think that practicality is also very important. And for farmers to make a change immediate and empowering farmers in a way that they, for example, through the microscope, women often say, I've always felt the Pachamama, the Earth Mother, but now I can see it, and making it, and their ability to manipulate functional groups in a way that helps them solve problems. And to put the largest labor force available to any farmer, which are not humans, but microbes, to work, on solving problems is extremely important. And so for me, there's social dimensions of that, but making it functional is also extremely important. And I think we need to keep track of both. And for me, it doesn't often enter through rationality, but rather through affect. Because what's rational today is to be a good capitalist. But I think we have to begin to imagine other worlds. And I think that's where ecofeminism has a lot to offer.
Now, Stephen, that is the perfect lead into you, Myra, because I think this is the critical question here that I think you can give us a great ideas about. So how does narrative storytelling, music, harmonics contribute to solving this problem of fear of the invisibles and all the kind of context that Vivi and Stephen and Satya have just outlined. I think this is a critical way forward for us, please.
We must remember that in the human world, the word is made by words, you know. We can see the word how it is, the things how they are, but we can understand by what we say, what we can tell about the word. For instance, I remember there's a Brazilian indigenous philosopher, which is called, oh my God, I forgot his name. That's not possible. Okay, Ailton Krenak. Ailton Krenak, he says that if we want to understand what does resistance means, what does survivor means, what does to be ecological means, we have to come back to what happened with the indigenous people here in America. Especially, he says that they understand about the end of the world, because we are saying, oh my God, we're facing climate change and capitalism and everything else. This is leading us to the end. But he says, if we want to understand how we can act with the world that is falling apart, we must ask the indigenous people here from America, especially American, he says, because 500 years ago, their world has finished, you know, with the colonization and everything. But it doesn't mean that it is over. It's like, oh my God, it's death. It's over. It's tragedy. No, it's resistance and understanding that here in this world we have many things happening at the same time, more than we can say. And that it's very important to say what is here. Just the people there are here, the visible, the invisibles, the nature itself, like the Pachamama that Sivan was saying. It's very important to understand and say this exists. It's not just an idea, a romantic idea of something that's alive. It's like, it's the thinking romantically that the idea of having a life planet's like a fiction. It is not. And we have the science to tell this. It is not fiction. It's life itself. And it's what makes life keep on together. And it is the way life happens. It's through dealing with challenges, very lot of challenges in this moment, this specific moment of history in which have climate change and a lot of problems. It's necessary, it's mandatory that we understand the stories that we've been telling and start to make it visible what is there, which is not just a fiction. The microbes are proof of this. I don't know if I was clear, but
Yeah. I think we have to move on with the time because, but I think this clarity, I think it's a beautiful reference to the Indigenous experience in Latin America, Australia, also everywhere really. Say what is there. We've heard from Vivi, the science and the practice, and struggling with the fear to do what you know in the systems. From Stephen, the beautiful way of people say felt Pachamama, but now I see it, and the context that Satya has put. So let's say what's there. Let's tell stories about what's there. Let's get better at this and do it all together. And I'd like to thank you all for your input to this, and we'll move on now. I would actually like to ask Christina Arnulfi and Elizabeth Bravo from the Latin American Union of Scientists Committed to Science and Nature. They have a statement they would like to read. Are you both, can you both unmute, Christina and Elizabeth?
Yes, we are.
Hello.
Acá
Please.
estoy.
Go ahead.
Tú primero, Elizabeth, porque yo estoy tratando de encontrar la versión en español.
Bueno, from the Union of Scientists Committed with Society and Nature in Latin America, UXNAL, We greet and celebrate the 20th anniversary of the international group Reimagining Resistance and its tireless research for the construction of a suitable metaphor for current times. The paradigm of dignified science share with you the vision of Mother Earth, one single health, an epistemic approach that prioritizes cooperations over competition from the perspective of microbial ecology, human intervention, and globalization. We believe that this vision is a world transforming as it transcends the specificities of each science and expand the established solid foundation of harmony and peace. We join the voice of millions of invisible and visible people of the world, workers of the land, of the science, art, and communications, and of all beings that inhabit planet Earth.
Wonderful. Thank you. Cristina, I think we'll read in Spanish.
Sí. Primero quisiera decir unas palabras sobre los invisibilizados de nuestra tierra. Como ustedes sabrán, América del Sur fue colonizada por los españoles y ellos lo que hicieron para invisibilizarnos, en primer lugar, impusieron su idioma. Yo voy a hablar en español, que no es nuestro idioma. El español es el idioma de nuestros conquistadores. Lamentablemente no puedo hablar en el idioma de los nativos de esta tierra, pero voy a hablar en español. Y voy a saludar en nombre de la Unión de Científicos Comprometidos con la Sociedad y la Naturaleza de América Latina, UXNAL, saludar y celebrar los 20 años del Grupo Internacional Reimaginando la Resistencia, en su incansable búsqueda y construcción de una metáfora adecuada para los tiempos actuales. El paradigma de la ciencia digna comparte con ustedes la visión de Madre Tierra, una sola salud. Un enfoque epistémico que prioriza la cooperación por sobre la competencia, desde la ecología microbiana, la intervención humana y la globalización. Creemos que esta visión es transformadora del mundo, pues trasciende las especificidades de cada ciencia y se expande para establecer sólidas bases de armonía y paz. Nos sumamos a las voces de los millones de invisibles e invisibilizados del mundo, trabajadores de la tierra, de la ciencia, el arte y la palabra, de todos los seres que habitamos el planeta Tierra. Felicitaciones.
Muchas gracias, Cristina and Elizabeth. There is a commitment for us to keep going on this wonderful work, and we will. Now I would like to ask Arturo Quispe, who is the coordinator of REACT Latin America, and much more, including a co-founder of Reimagining Resistance, to introduce the call to action. And it'll be with the participation of Susana Ramirez, a anthropologist from Spain, with Mayra, who we have met, Juan Carlos Lopez, the communication advisor to REACT Latin America, Silvina Alessio from Argentina, and Bernardo Vélez from Colombia. Please, Arturo.
Thank you very much for Mary. I would like to say again thank you to everybody in this morning and afternoon for sharing their perspectives, their feelings, answers, and clues. Very important from the academy, from the indigenous people, from the artists, from the musicians, from the singers, from the dancers, from the dreamers. Thank you for joining us to celebrate World Microbial Day, for being part of this small assembly made up of billions of invisible beings, for accompanying us in our journey of 20 years, exploring, looking for, searching, trying to answer these life questions. How should we understand our place in the web of life? How we can learn from the bacteria, and how can we learn to look practically at ways for building up a better world, and how we can continue walking and dreaming. What is the world that we are going to leave to our sons and daughters, our grandchildren? Let's hear the voices from Argentina, from Brazil, from Spain, from Ecuador, from Colombia. Let's hear their voices join this afternoon, this morning, to call for action to everybody to join in this long way to walk yet. Thank you. Please, let's hear them.
Vivimos en un mundo de bacterias y microbios. Están en todas partes, dentro y alrededor de nosotros. El sustento y la sostenibilidad de la vida en el planeta dependen de su incansable labor en todo tipo de ecosistemas, desde las profundidades de los océanos hasta la estratosfera, desde el mamífero más diminuto hasta el árbol más grande. Comprender las funciones vitales y admirar la belleza de los microbiomas nos permite danzar con las bacterias, para rejuvenecernos caminando hacia la salud planetaria.
Un mundo multiverso, interconectado y único, poblado de plantas, animales y humanos sanos, es posible con microbiomas diversos y saludables, y es también necesario para contener la resistencia a los antibióticos, que es síntoma de la enfermedad como resultado de nuestra negativa a reconocer lo invisible. Cuidar significa estar consciente y alerta de aquello que no se ve, como responsabilidad colectiva cuando de ofensas a la vida misma se trata.
Necessitamos aprender a dançar com as bactérias. De fato, necessitamos ir muito além. Aprendendo a dançar com as bactérias, reconhecer a complexidade e a unidade da trama da vida, e a diversidade como princípio fundamental de nossa existência. Sentir e viver um mundo microbiano como o coração de todos os ecossistemas. Dançar e convidar a baixar as nossas armas. Recuperar o senso de pertencimento à natureza e desfazer-nos de uma vez por todas dessa noção de que temos posse sobre ela. Isso é parte da estratégia para curar o planeta.
Resaltar a través de la evidencia científica, el arte y la música la importancia de las bacterias en la salud humana, animal y de los ecosistemas. Visibilizar lo invisible, escuchar lo inaudito, celebrar cada minuto de la invisible pero vibrante vida.
Promover encuentros reflexivos con los otros, los visibles e invisibles, donde la voluntad de cambio constituya la fuerza y las acciones nuevas hagan posible un mundo inclusivo, saludable, y la danza continúe dando lugar a la creación de la vida al infinito.
Asumir colectivamente el desafío para visualizar lo oculto y eclipsado, definiendo la esencia para caminar hacia el bien común, proponiendo dinámicas que amplifiquen esas voces y creen espacios donde se escuchen todas las voces, se cuenten todas las historias y escuchen a su vez todas las historias que subyacen en ellas.
Volver a encontrarnos con la vida, para dejar de transitar los caminos de la enfermedad y la muerte, recuperar nuestra plenitud de vida, buscar el camino del equilibrio y la armonía, conservando nuestro ritmo interno y acompañando el latir de los otros.
Mirar hacia la tierra, repensar nuestras prácticas, regenerar el suelo y así regenerar la vida, escuchando las voces de nuestros ancestros que nos invitan a cuidar nuestras sombras ubicadas en el lado invisible de la vida.
Abrir canales de expresión a los antiguos y diversos saberes que hoy, resignificados, emergen para que la salud se descentralice y se bifurque en infinitos canales de una red comunitaria.
Preguntarnos otra vez qué significa vivir nos ayudará a pasar del modelo antropocéntrico al del encuentro y la convivencia, del yo al nosotros, del miedo a la alegría, la reciprocidad y la complementariedad.
Así aprendemos de las bacterias que las reglas de juego para que la vida florezca tienen que incluir flexibilidad, diversidad, adaptabilidad, comunicación horizontal, sostenibilidad y resistencia.
Así todos seremos naturaleza, trama vital y creación colectiva, estética y ética centrada en la vida, en diálogo permanente con los otros, con las bacterias y con la naturaleza.
So let's do it. And to finish, let's remember everything that everybody has proposed, commit to telling these stories of the invisibles, but let's also now listen to and watch the music and the dance of and for the invisibles that was recorded at Tinkuukupacha, the Art, Science and Soil Assembly in May in Ecuador. But even though we're in front of our screens, maybe we can get up and, as Viviane urged us, we can feel it in our bodies. That's what links us to all of it. Let's tell our stories in movement as well. So Juan Carlos, can you play the video and we will say goodbye at the end? But let's get up and move a little bit, remembering the bacteria.
Hello, I'm Alexis Zapata, an Ecuadorian musician and composer. Today I want to talk about zapateo, the rhythmic striking of our feet against the ground in my country's traditional dances. To dance with zapateo is to awaken Pachamama. During Inti Raymi, dancers stamp the earth to thank her for the harvest and open a dialogue with Mother Earth. Every step reminds us that we belong to the same cycle of life. The zapateo is not merely symbolic. As we practice it, electrons from the ground balance our nervous system, reduce inflammation, and regulate cortisol. Zapateo is a sacred dance that enlightens our communities and elevates collective consciousness.
Sin rendirse, Caipi, sin temores, Kunan, aprenderemos, danzaremos.
Thank you, everybody. We now close the meeting and let's work together and continue this fantastic journey and important journey.